Can you explain what a poultry catcher actually does?
So a poultry catcher is the person or people that are hired to go to farms to load up the birds into crates onto the back of lorries to be sent to slaughter.
So you weren't responsible for killing the birds?
We weren't directly responsible for killing the birds, but we were part of that chain. We also had to, we were under orders actually, to not put any on that were deemed unvaluable, and that would usually involve breaking the necks of these birds because they just weren't wanted. So that would include ones that were too small. It would involve any that had severe damage, so clearly broken limb, like legs and wings, or their entire backs were scratched and bleeding, because birds do that when they're in confinement, and it can lead to fights, or if they're injured they'll try and scratch each other to death almost. Yeah, so we'd have to put those down, kill them. We had to kill them, and then they were just taken to a side, and if the shed wasn't being emptied, they'd be left there for the farmhands to take out to the dead bin in the morning, or they were just gathered up with the rest of the waste and sent to be incinerated.
How many birds generally did you have to load up on the trucks per night?
It changed between turkeys and chickens drastically, but then within chickens there was also a lot of differences. So for turkeys, there's, on a module, there's 9 drawers for turkeys, and usually you'd put 4 in each drawer. So it works out to 792 on a lorry for turkeys. In the summertime, you might only put 3 in because they would die of heat stroke otherwise, and that was, I suppose, bad for the business. They didn't care about their health, not really. They put it down as that, but it was more, you can't send them through if they're already dead. So it was more profitable to send another lorry afterwards and get another load. For Christmas, you're eating female turkeys. I don't know if anyone knows that. If you had a male, they wouldn't fit in the oven. That could be 10 or 12 in a drawer. They're a fair bit smaller, really. And then for chickens, you'd actually have 12 drawers on each module, so there was an extra row. Essentially it goes 3 across and 4 down instead of 3 across and 3 down. And in them it could be anywhere from 15 to 30, really, depending on the size. Fully grown, you're probably looking about average 18 in a drawer. Any younger, because sometimes you sent them early, sometimes they were just being moved to another farm. Not everyone raised them from birth, so you'd put in less. The smaller they are, the more you can fit in a drawer, essentially. And sometimes you put in 15, especially in sort of maybe your more high class of birds, you'd put in less numbers because then you'd have less damage. But yeah, usually around 18 in a drawer. Yeah.
It seems like this is quite a difficult thing to talk about, so what was it that appealed to you about this sort of job, if anything, in the first place?
Well, my dad runs the gang, so I suppose it's a family business. My godfather had it before him, and my uncle also worked for him. My dad's godson also worked for him, and there's a lot of links. My brother-in-law also worked for him at one point before I was my brother-in-law. So I grew up around it more than anything else. I've known it happened since as long as I've known what anything was, really. I knew my dad was a catcher. So yeah, it's always just been the done thing. It's hard to pinpoint one thing specifically that really made me think this is something that appeals to me. I suppose the first time I went on a real catch, it was because I'd said to my dad something along the lines of, I want to earn more money. I don't have any money. I've got my pocket money and I don't have anything. I want to earn some real money. So I asked if I could go. And this is obviously before I was vegan, before I even really knew, I didn't know what a vegan was at all. So he sent me out, and I don't know, they were nice to me. The people that worked for him were nice to me. So as boss's son, they're going to be nice to me. But I got on with it. Something, I suppose, kind of proving that you're a man, that I could do it. I was how old was I first time I went? I was 16 years old. And I could do really hard farm work that grown men, they were telling me, I'd walked out of, never turned up for a second day because they found it too hard. And here I was, 16 years old. I could do it. I was fine. I was making my dad proud. I was getting on with the lads. I don't know. Is it that social acceptance as well? Plus, like I say, when I got my first pay packet, because you get paid by the load, and it was turkeys, and it was all turkeys, and they're expensive bed. What was it? It's 20 quid a load. So, I mean, the first week, if I'd done 10 load, that's 10 hours worth of work. A lot of travelling, but 10 hours worth of work, you get 200 quid. I've got no rent, no bills, no nothing.
Yeah.
It's appealing to someone like that. And like I say, I come from a big farming community. Like I say, I look how many people worked for my dad who were just related to me. It was just what was done. Everyone around us had someone that worked on a farm. It was just part of life. And I was able to do one of the hardest jobs, or what seemed to be one of the hardest jobs. So it's not that the actual work appealed to me necessarily. It was the fact that I could do something which would be considered quite sort of, sort of manly, for lack of a better word. I was proving I'm not a kid anymore. I was turning into a real man. It's stupid now when it's coming out of my mouth, but these are the things that go through people's minds in these sort of jobs, especially when you're young. Like I say, the money's astounding, but you won't be able to pay me anything to get me into one of the sheds ever again.
So, can you describe the typical sort of conditions that the birds lived in?
Well, again, it did depend, but essentially, if you wanted one line, it's they live in their own filth for their entire lives. You see these videos where it looks like it's just waste on the floor. It's not actually. I'm not saying it's any better, because the waste is still there. But what they do is when they first go in, it's fresh wood shavings everywhere, or straw. Especially with turkeys, it's more straw. But I suppose with chickens especially, it's almost always going to be wood shavings. And they go on them, and then twice or three times a week the farmers are meant to go around and what they call bed up, which is basically get these massive, but you see them in pet food shops or pet shops, like those big bales of wood shavings. There's thousands of them on any farm, and they go around, slit them open at the bottom, and just walk around and jimmy them out and spread them out. And it basically covers up any waste that's on there, and it creates another layer, but obviously it's still there, it soaks in, and it just builds up over, well, chickens are 6 weeks old when they go to slaughter. So it's 6 weeks of waste and wood shavings, and just waste and wood shavings.
So is it just cleared every 6 weeks?
Yeah, it's just cleared every 6 weeks. They don't, and it's not even deep cleaned either. I used to see them when we'd clear a shed, there'd be a cleanup crew come in, and basically they have big machines, and they go around and they dig out all the waste, put it in a big Arctic truck, and it goes to biofuel, and all this waste goes to power what is considered renewable energy, which in themselves are apparently horrible to work at. They're quite deadly, but that's not really the point here. Yeah, so they cleaned out, the floor is cleared once every 6 weeks in their terms. For turkeys, they're usually about 3 months old-ish when they go to slaughter. So I'm assuming it'll be the exact same process. Or for the most part, there's actually one farm I know specifically which doesn't do that, and that was a horrible, horrible place to go. It's down in Uttoxeter. I'm not exactly sure where, because I don't know the area very well. And this guy had a massive farm. He was the only guy that worked there. He refused to hire anyone else. And instead of moving it out, these sheds were old Air Force base, or not base, but like hangars
yeah.
from World War II. And he had a scoop truck, and all he'd do after they were cleared out, he just pushed it all into this massive mountain in the middle of each shed. It was absolutely disgusting. I hated going there. I don't even know what he did when it filled up. Like, there must have been something at the end. Like, he must have had someone come and get it eventually, but he didn't bother. So essentially, in the middle of this shed, I mean, again, this is like worst case scenario sort of thing, but obviously all of them are horrible. But he'd have brood after brood of bears just living in this shed that just had a slowly increasing amount of their predecessors' waste in the middle. It was vile. It really was vile. But you can't say anything. You just have to get in and get out. What was I going to say?
Did they ever get outside at all into the sunlight?
Not really. I mean, I know that the adverts and things dictate, like, or manipulate people and try and convince them that they did, but they don't. Not really. Especially sort of your bog standard bed that anyone will pick up for, like, cheap in Tesco's or KFC or something like that. They're not free range. And even free range, as far as I'm aware, they only have to have access to it, to the outside, for 2 weeks of life. It doesn't mean they're actually going outside, because all the food and the water is inside. And if you've ever seen any of these birds, they can barely walk. So when they open the sides, because usually there's like panels in the side of the sheds, and they'll open up and I'll let the birds step out. They'll go outside, and we had to sometimes round them up a little bit. But it's not like it was every bird, it was a few, and usually it was because they were on the edge anyway, and they just sort of moved a little bit out. It wasn't like they were roaming free outside around apple orchards and things like that, which people try and convince you that they are. Yeah, they have access to it for a little bit of time, and then they just shut the outside shut off to them for the rest of their lives.
So they're crammed into these hangars, and they are crammed in, aren't they? There's like a lot in there, and I mean, the smell must be unbearable for the workers, let alone the birds that can't actually ever get away from it.
The smell is probably the reason why the people that work in the industry, they don't say anything. They just get in and out as quick as possible. They're not interested in animal welfare, because how can you be interested in animal welfare if you're in an environment which is so putrid that you yourself can barely stand it for 45 minutes to an hour? You just get in and out, and you don't complain, because then you'll, I don't know, lose your job, be mocked, I don't know. You just sort of shut it out, I suppose. But yeah, the smell is vile, but it's not just the smell, it's the actual air. Like, it does burn your lungs after a while, and if you haven't sit in it your entire life, I mean, they're 6 weeks old, and they're force bred to grow massive in 6 weeks of chickens, but I don't think they could live very much longer, even if they went, because, I mean, I have no evidence of this, but there's no way a living creature could breathe that their entire lives and live a natural length of time. It's got to be toxic. It is toxic. It does burn you. Like, you'll get ammonia burns on the inside of your throat. Sometimes I used to cough up this, I don't even know what it was. It's like dust and just everything. It was just horrible. It really was. But you don't question it, because again, you get compensated pretty well, and you don't really think about it. Another thing on welfare is you're meant to work to the clock, in a sense. Like, you are paid by weight, essentially. Like, no two loads are the same. They're roughly the same, but no two loads are the same, and you're paid that amount regardless of how long it takes you to do it. But you're still sort of on the clock. You're expected to do it in a certain amount of time. And since with chickens, what you're doing, like over 5,000 birds on one load, and you're meant to do it in like 40 minutes, 45 minutes.
Gosh.
You don't have time to take a lot of care with them. And that's not me excusing myself for what I've done. You can't expect that people that are basically being forced to do it in 45 minutes or threaten you'll lose your job if you don't keep up. They're just going to do it as quickly as possible to get in and out. There's no thought or consideration going into these beds because, quite frankly, you don't have the time to do so. People develop techniques to make sure that when they're scooping them up, they're not breaking any bones or anything, because again, you'll lose your job if you break bones too often. If they get to the slaughterhouse and they're dead, or loads of wings are snapped, or legs are broken, or they're upside down because they can't be on their backs because they can't flip over, and their own chest is so heavy it'll suffocate them to death, because that's what people are demanding without even realising they're demanding it. So that you develop a technique to get it pretty much right, but that's not out of necessarily a welfare perspective. That's because you don't want to lose your job, and you don't want to have to go home the next day and tell your wife and kids that you're gonna have to try and find more way. With the birds, it's not really a consideration. I mean, sometimes you'll get your foreman, they'll come out and they'll check, and I've seen them before. We'll get a pole because they've seen a bird on its back. They come and they check that you're doing your job right sometimes, and they'll put a pole in, sort of try and flip one over. That's been already in the module. It's on the back of the truck. They can't get it down again because there's no time. So he'll sort of be stood on a box or something. He'll just try and flip that bird over. But again, that's not because of welfare. That's because of they don't want bad publicity. They don't want the numbers saying, actually, you've got so many dead on arrival. It looks bad on you. It's nothing to do with welfare. Yeah, and the RSPCA, they came a couple of times, but they don't stay for very long.
Why did the RSPCA come?
Well, every farm has to be RSPCA approved.
Okay.
This is why you see it on adverts. You see it on red tractor
I think
stickers.
I saw it on a
and things.
McDonald's advert saying RSPCA approved beef.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and I was wondering, what does that even mean?
Yeah. I can't speak much to the beef. I really can't. But for chickens, it literally means they've come in and they've seen either a farm or they've seen a particular brood from birth to death, and they followed it and agreed that somehow it's humane. I really don't even know what they're looking for. But when they used to come into us and people used to come and observe us, they'd sort of stand there for our module. Okay, you'd do our module. They wouldn't even stand close. They'd sort of be over there, and they'd just tick a couple of boxes on a clipboard and walk out. I mean, we'd be told to sort of, oh yeah, by the way, the RSPCA is coming, or some animal welfare board's coming, or the big boss is coming. Just be extra careful. And so you'd slow down maybe just to do a show, but they didn't really check. They weren't checking really. They were just, like I said, they were just there to tick some boxes and walk out. That was it.
So organisations that are supposed to be for the protection of animals are coming just basically to approve animals on their way to slaughterhouses. I wonder if they then go and eat at McDonald's afterwards. It's so bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. But every animal that goes to slaughter has to be approved by vets. It's the same, isn't it? It's like how you're meant to be a vet, you're meant to be looking after animals, and you send them off to die.
And then you're going to have pork chops for your tea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I think I know the answer to my next question, but overall, do you think that the birds were well cared for?
They did the bare minimum to ensure that they got a profit at the end of the day. That was it.
So you feel that the birds are seen more as a product than a living being?
Yeah, they definitely are. They're referred to as a crop. Like, I don't know anyone else that would conflate a field full of corn, which is a crop, with a shed full of chickens or turkeys. I mean, if you asked any normal person, if you took them to both and said, what would you call this to the corn? They'll probably eventually get to, oh yeah, it's a crop, innit? It's like that's the crop that this farmer grows. If you took them to a turkey farm, they wouldn't call a shed full of birds a crop.
No. Is that quite common then, to refer to chickens and turkeys as a crop?
Yeah. I mean, these people aren't under any illusions. They know what it is. But I think, to an extent, it speaks a lot to the fact that we do try and remove that sort of living creature aspect.
Yeah. Desensitization.
Yeah, the desensitization.
So, in light of the recent coronavirus outbreak being a zoonotic disease, can you explain the standard industry practice for handling diseased birds and for preventing contamination?
So I suppose a short answer is there isn't really any.
Really?
Yeah. There'd be dose of antibiotics in the food if they weren't organic. I once was taken by a foreman with, I think, his daughter to go and inject some newly born turkeys with, I don't even know. I really don't even know what I was injecting them with. I was just told to do it. But it was some sort of, I don't know if it was a vaccine, I don't know, it might have just been some antibiotics. All I knew is that it costs £100 for a bottle about that big. So they have some sort of preventative measures in that sense, but disease was really common. You get told every now and again, oh, that shed's infected, they've all got bird flu. And so I remember once the farmer, I think it was the farmer, said that to us, and I asked our head at that point, oh, what's going to happen with them? Are we going to load them up and then they're going to be sent somewhere else? I was like, oh no, they're going to be sent to the same place. They'll just be put through last. But I said to him, these machines run 24/7. And he's like, yeah. So last on paper, they'll last through that day on paper. But like I say, it runs 24/7. So even if they had a little break in just after them, just to wipe it down a little bit, you're not going to be able to do deep clean. These birds are going to infect anything that comes after them. And I think we've all seen the footage of what happens in slaughterhouses and packaging plants and things like that. So it's not sanitary in the first place, let alone adding into that strain of bird flu. On top of that as well, we actually got sent to another farm after that. So we could inadvertently have infected an entire other farm just by being put in that situation. There's no showers, there's no nothing. I mean, you can change your clothes, you can bring in a new set of clothes, and you can have a bit of a wash at the sink with some antibacterial. So, but that's not good enough. Not if this, we don't know that they are really playing with fire in certain cases. Like, not even in certain cases, in most farms, it really is just disgusting what they do. But the people don't know. They just think they're grown and that's it, and they've got antibiotics till they find no. There's strains of bird flu that pop up every now and again on most farms, and it's just sort of taken as something that happens. There's no real care for it. I mean, when you come in, you're meant to disinfect your wheels. That sounds really weird, but at the front of every farm, on most farms, there's like a hose. You're meant to wash off your wheels when you come and leave. People don't always do it. I mean, you can say that they should, but we all know people don't do everything that they're meant to. And if you're on a schedule, that just seems like an inconvenience. Again, I'm not making excuses for them, but this is what people think like. So some of the safety measures just aren't abided by. Yeah. Plus, even if you are disinfecting your wheels, that entire truck, if these birds were infected, that entire truck is now carrying bird flu of some kind. There's not a lot of care put into it. Yes, they send them to slaughter and they kill them. I highly doubt those birds didn't end up in KFC and Tesco's and everything like that, because why wouldn't they? I mean, the farmer's not going to lose profit. And they're dead. Who's going to know?
Yeah.
Which means that out there, at that time specifically, there was food that was infected with what could have been a highly contagious disease. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, not every bird flu can transmit to humans, but in certain cases we don't know till after the fact. So take a situation like me going into that shed. I could have picked it up, it could have infected me. It could take a week, 2 weeks to actually show symptoms, in which time I've infected my entire family, half my town. And I mean, I don't know how much you know about keeping chickens, but around chickens there's always rats, always. So regardless of how safe you are with the chickens, the rats are there. They come and go as they please. They will leave the chicken farm or turkey farm. They'll go into the fields next door, which are usually full of crops, wheat, barley. It could spread that way. It's not easily contained. Any infection on the farm is not easily contained, and washing down your wheels and having the catchers or the farmhands use a bit of antibacterial soap after they've been in contact with a shed of birds that have been infected isn't enough. It's never going to be enough. There's literally nothing that would be enough in that situation, because, like I say, if one bird in that shed gets infected, they will all get infected. It's really close confinement. There's no way for them to avoid it. Their diet is so poor, their immune system is so poor. That's why they're pumped full of antibiotics all the time. If they weren't,
and this is common practice all over the board, isn't it?
This is common practice. This is normal. I've never seen a farm that didn't look exactly like every other farm.
A lot of people have the "I grew up on a farm, I know it's not like that." It seems like every time you try and talk about something like this, there's always somebody that jumps up and says, no, I grew up on a farm, that's not how it is.
Well, I grew up on many farms and it was exactly how it is.
I know it's a different part of the process completely, but I've seen quite a lot of videos of butchers who, like, they'll be like cutting up pork or beef, and they'll find a big weeping tumour, and it's like it's weeping green stuff, and they say they just cut around it and they still use that animal. So it seems like working with diseased animals is really common all across the industries that kind of pertain to providing meat products.
Yeah, it is actually. On that, there's something called MEM. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's MEM. It's mechanically reconstituted meat. So essentially, after they've stripped the body of all the muscle tissue that they actually want to use, all that's really left is like tumours and bits of gristle, basically the carcass, all the stuff that you'd never actually be able to sell to anyone. And they put it through this machine, and it rips everything out, and it creates MEM, and it's like a really poor grade of meat, but it goes into things that humans do consume. I think it goes into like dog food mainly and things like that, but it's still there. Yeah, I'd say hot dogs probably use it. Okay. Things like that. Like your processed meats, a lot of like your really rubbish processed meats. I mean, I only heard about it once. It was just explained as the process sort of thing. But yeah, I remember being quite repulsed by that at the time. There's loads of people have this idea of what a chicken looks like, and if you go into one of those sheds, you'll see all manner of just amorphous, really just hard done by animals. Like, none of them look the same, but they've all got something wrong with them.
Really?
Like, yeah, you'd be hard pressed to find any bird that didn't have something wrong with them.
So they're not healthy like in the adverts?
No, not at all. Well, for starters, especially with chickens, they lay in their own filth. It's ammonia. They have ammonia in their waste, and their entire chest is featherless. Every bird, because it's all just bent away. I mean, and that's if that's the only thing that's wrong with them, they're lucky. Like, if you go in, they have legs that have broken and healed badly. Like I say, some of them have pecked each other, and there's feathers missing on the back because they've clawed at each other. They all get debeaked, which is a horrible process. Yeah, like I said, they're just poorly fed, poorly treated. They're nothing like what a chicken should look like. It's hard to explain, really, what they look like and what they suffer through every day. It really is vile.
So would you say it's fair to say that their lives have no peace, no freedom, no dignity whatsoever?
None at all. I mean, how much peace, freedom and dignity can you have if your life is cut short to 6 weeks, you're fed something that is quite right. I don't even know what it is. It's just a mixture of crap, essentially. You're living in your own waste. You can wake up after you've slept and find that you're surrounded by dead. The person that you fell asleep next to could be dead when you wake up, and it might be left there. It might be picked up. If they are not picked up, they just rot where they are, and you're not really going to move that far from there for most of your life. There's no care given to them things. Them birds.
So, like, during the time that you were doing this job, did you feel that it was wrong, or were you just desensitized to it?
So, I suppose since I grew up knowing what it was, I'm never going to say it seemed right, but it was just normal. And when I first went, because when I went catching for the first time, wasn't actually the first time I'd been to work. When I was 14, I'd also gone doing something called tipping, which was basically, like I said before, about how you sometimes moving birds from either one farm to another farm, so they weren't going to a slaughterhouse, but you'd still fill them onto the trucks. This farm just wanted them moving from one shed to another, but since it was such a huge amount, they hired catchers to come and do it. And so you just grab the drawer and you tip them out like that, yeah, and you count them to make sure that there was enough in the drawer. I mean, that, like I said, that was the first time I'd ever been in one properly. I'd seen them before, but I'd never actually worked in one. And that was kind of weird, because it's different from seeing it from a distance. Like I said, I'd literally seen the sheds, I'd seen the turkeys before, but I'd never actually properly interacted with them. So interacting with them and tipping out of the drawers, that was kind of weird, because it's like, even though I did it, and I was doing it with my friend at the time, because my dad had just said, hey, do you two want to make 30 quid for an hour's work? And I was like, obviously. So we went. And I suppose, in a way, like I say, it didn't feel right to do it, but it was just the done thing. So we did it, and we got paid, and we went home. That was it. But going on to when I actually started catching is a bit different, because I was in a shed that was full of fully grown turkeys. They weren't, I mean, obviously none of them are well kept, but these ones weren't particularly well kept. They weren't the worst I've ever seen, but they weren't the best either. So it smelt different to the last time as well, and they were bigger. And I was doing a different job. I was putting them in the crates instead this time. And I remember putting them in, and I was when you start any job, you're not going to be the quickest. But I was getting the hang of it, and they saw I was getting the hang of it. But I was still sort of maybe a bit slower than the rest of them. I can't remember who said it to me, but they said, "Oh, you don't have to worry. You can speed up a bit. You're not going to hurt them." I feel like I did know that was a bit of a lie. Well, it was a full lie, but I believed it anyway. And I think that's because like I say, you're 16 years old. You want to be accepted. You don't want to lose the job. You want to maintain that respect, especially if it's my dad. I don't want to let him down, sort of thing. But again, I wanted to prove I could do it, so I accepted the lie because it made it easier. And then you just sort of get in the swing of things, and you just do it as quick as you can and get home.
So what actually made you stop?
It's strange. I saw Gary Yourofsky's speech, the greatest speech ever told. Yeah, I know a lot of people say that, don't they, when they say about veganism. The problem was, I was in my third year at university when I saw it. So I've been doing it for, 5 years at that point-ish. 5 years I've been working part-time for my dad. Yeah, and I couldn't argue with any of his points in that video. So, vis-a-vis, I had to turn vegan. I just had to. But when I was at university, it was easy. Like, I could not eat meat. And that was it. But then university finished, and I had nothing, and I had to end up going back home, and I couldn't find work anywhere. So at this point, even though I'd maybe been calling myself vegan, I clearly wasn't. because I couldn't not have a job. In my mind, I couldn't not work, and I had nowhere else to go. So reluctantly, I went back working with my dad. But it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same at all. It messed with my head a lot, really, because I could see it for what it really was this time. And then I was thinking, how many thousands have I already sent to their deaths, and I couldn't get that out of my head, and I'm just adding to it, and I was calling myself such a fucking hypocrite all the time. I was just constantly getting at myself for what I was doing, and no one around me understood it. No one. I was told, and I'm not going to mention any names, by family members, things like sometimes you got to put aside your ethics until you've done what you need to do. I got told to think of myself like a vet having to put down animals, which obviously is bullshit. Other people just, generally just not getting it. My partner at the time just did not understand veganism at all. Claimed to, but didn't. None of them could understand where I was coming from. And I'm not going to say I was forced into the sheds, because I wasn't. I could have walked away, couldn't I? I could have, and eventually I did, because I realised this just isn't who I am. So even though I've not eaten meat for 5 years, and at first I called myself vegan, it was easy to do that when I was away from that life. It was easy to do that when I was at university. I was 200 miles away from home. But then when I finished and I had nothing and I had to move back home, and where I lived, it's literally farm work. That's it. Basically, that's it. I think at the time there was one job going at a dog food factory, which would have involved meat products anyway. So that sort of didn't help. I started thinking things like, maybe I'm the crazy one because everyone else around me just thinks I'm being weird. It doesn't understand why I have a problem with this at all. Maybe I'm wrong. But every time I go into one of those sheds, I would literally dread it, to the point where I was just angry at everything. I was clearly depressed. Yeah, I wasn't very nice to work with either. I remember once, I was just been, yeah, I got so angry. Eventually the guy I was working with just told me to shut up. I don't even know what to say. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't even have told him when he told me that, what I'd been saying. To an extent, I think I was going a bit mental. I didn't enjoy anything. I didn't enjoy the money. I didn't like. It felt wrong. It felt really dirty. There's no way I can frame this that makes me look good, and I don't want him to think what I'm trying to get across is that for me, the hardest part wasn't cutting out meat at all. It was cutting myself away from that entire life. That was life as I knew it. Back in the real world, away from uni, that was my life. And you can stop eating a bacon sandwich, but when you've got nothing and you're expected to do that was hard. That was really hard. Yeah, and then it was the following Christmas, or that Christmas that year, I'd said by that point, I'm not gonna go in another shed. I'd moved away. It was near the sea, and obviously I wasn't doing that job anymore, so I felt pretty good in myself for managing that. I got away, but then I had no income, and there weren't any jobs going. And at Christmas time, obviously, that is a fairly lucrative business. Around the clock for 6 weeks, it's insane. It really is insane. Horrible working conditions. They shouldn't legally be allowed to make people work that much, but that's not the point here. I was struggling. I had no money. Who I was with at the time was getting pretty annoyed that I didn't have any money. The only option that seemed available was to ask if there was any work going to my dad, who obviously would have said yes, but I really didn't want to, and it was really bad. One day it's like 6 a.m. or something. I was just wandering around. And I know it's only a fleeting thought, but it was really bad. And it was like, I didn't have a job, and that was all that was in my head. Like, the only place I can earn money is in the sheds. And I was walking by the sea, and I realised I could just walk into it if I wanted to. And obviously I didn't. I'm here now, and it was only like a brief sort of fleeting thought. But I think it goes a long way to show I'd rather do that than ever have to go back into one of those places.
So there's been like quite a few reports that people who are like working in this kind of industry is a big contributor towards PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, even though I've just said what I said, I don't think I really attributed it before. So for a long time, I said I was fine personally, but it was a few weeks ago, probably a couple of months ago now, someone asked me, and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." But I think maybe I just sort of blocked it out more than anything else. Like, and whenever I'm going somewhere and I know where a shed is, like, I can't just go past and not think about it. My mind goes to it. It knows what's in there and what happens in there. Yeah, I don't think I've got it bad. I really don't. I think I got out pretty young and I didn't have to do it for the rest of my life. But I think anyone that stays there a long time, especially when you're having to kill, so probably more in the slaughterhouses, I have no doubt that affects people. Because we're not meant to do it. We're not meant to be able to kill so clinically. Yeah.
Yeah, like even if people can somehow justify hunting as, oh well, it's what my ancestors did. Well, they didn't have them on a conveyor belt the way that they do in slaughterhouses.
No,
like,
exactly.
It's just completely different.
No, exactly. Bollocks anyway, innit? I don't.
Yeah.
I really don't get people that hunt. I really don't. There's no need. But that's one, like I say, that's one animal, and you feel like you've done it for a reason. There's, I don't know, some sort of macho pride in it. Well, I can't really take the mick out of them, really, because like I said before a bit ago, like, I felt sort of manly because I could do that job. So I'm not really mocking them for thinking that way, but one versus thousands, sometimes thousands a day, there's a big difference there. There's a massive difference there.
How did you deal with the shift in perspective?
I mean, it was odd. It really was, because, like I say, I was full-blown meat eater, worked on poultry farms, sent them to slaughter, and then, what, a 45-minute speech later, I'd completely turned against my entire life. Realised, I don't know, the hypocrisy behind it, the lack of necessity, because I think that's it. I think I'd never heard of a vegan. I mean, what was this? This was 2015? Yeah, I'd heard of vegetarians. I don't think I'd ever heard vegan except in The Simpsons, in that episode where Lisa talks to that guy and he's like, I'm a level 5 vegan or something. But I didn't understand what it was. I just thought it was some... I think from that side, you sort of just think it's a dietary restriction, and it's not on the same level. Like, you're not, as a kid, you're not presented, here's 3 equally valid options for how you want to live. Do you want to eat no animal products whatsoever, be a vegan, which will do nothing but improve your health as long as you eat right, and do no harm? Do you want to be a vegetarian, which still kills baby chicks and cows? Or do you want to be omnivorous and eat everything? No, they're not equal in anyone's eyes. And like I said, I didn't even know vegans existed. If you come from an omnivorous standpoint, or my lifestyle at that point, you fed the dogma that vegetarians are weak, pasty, sickly, needing supplements every 5 minutes. They're not equal in any sense of the word. And then to suddenly realise actually veganism is a philosophy based on very solid ethics, and you can't argue anything against it because everything that you've been told up to this point is a lie, not perpetrated by the people that told you about it, but by the fact that they didn't really fully understand nutrition or ethics or anything like that. I'm not going to say it was hard to deal with in terms of I couldn't process it, but it was a big culture shock more than anything else. And to realise everything that I'd done was unnecessary. Even though you sort of think, well, people need to eat, so this is the only way we can feed everyone. It takes that away. You've got nothing. You know, that if you were to ask anyone like on these farms, that's like the bottom line. That is the one thing that they will never move on, or the last line of defense. People have to eat. But as a vegan, or realizing that veganism is legit, you take away that last barrier. It's gone. So I didn't have that anymore. And I sort of had to deal with the fact that, yeah, like I say, everything that I'd done was unnecessary. And like I was thinking, do I have to sort of make reparations? What do I do? Like, how am I going to be accepted among these people for what I've done? So I did the obvious thing. I contacted Gary Roski and I explained to him what I'd done. And he said, there's nothing you can do now to make up for what you've done. You've done it. It's over. You've seen the reality of the world, and all you can do now is fight for them. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing it a lot because it was quite a long message.
And very few people are born vegan, are they?
Yeah, exactly. So we're all coming from it from a very different standpoint. I think most people that go vegan are probably just people that have eaten meat and not really thought about it. I don't necessarily think that a lot of them have come from somewhere. I don't think I know any other chicken catcher or turkey catcher that's ever gone vegan. It's just unheard of, really. It felt slightly out of place in veganism and in normal life for a little bit. My friends were pretty good. My friends didn't really. I think they were more surprised than anything else that me, of all people, had turned vegan. And you get the odd jibe. At the time I did about it. It's a circle of life, man. But then, ironically, the person that said that last time I saw him was talking about going vegan. So time changes everyone, I suppose.
So why do people continue to do this?
I think it goes back to what I was saying a minute ago about how you're not presented, let's forget vegetarianism because vegetarianism is stupid. You're not presented at birth, here are options. Do you want to do no exploitation of animals and be absolutely healthy, or do you want to eat everything, even other living creatures? Like they're not presented as equal options. Like I say, like you fed a lot of propaganda about how we need meat to be strong and manly. I mean, we had an entire documentary on it with the Game Changers debunking that entire mindset. Like it took till 2019 for that to even become mainstream as a thought process. You've got so much propaganda working against you as an average person that I think that's why people stay that way, because and again, like they don't know what goes on behind closed doors. Yeah, fair enough. Like I'm raising it, so I'm not numb necessarily, but because I knew the reality from a young age, it was just normal. Like even if it was on some level, I must have known it was wrong, and I think I did. It's just the way things are done. And you hear that everywhere you go. Again, it's like the ancestors saying, "Oh, we've been doing it for thousands of years." It's just the way it's just another way of saying it's the way it's always been done. But people stick to that. People believe it's the only way it's ever been done, so we're going to stick to it because that's all it is. But reality is, the world changes all the time, and people just seem to have forgotten. So yeah, that's the only reason I can think that people remain indoctrinated with all the propaganda and all the indoctrinations throughout their entire life. That cognitive dissonance, asking them, yeah, you think factory farming's horrible, but you continue to support it. That impasse is bridged by the propaganda.
Do you think that will sort of fall apart eventually and people will see it for what it really is?
I hope so. Yeah. I hope so.
Is there any real difference between standard free range and organic poultry?
The only real difference is the fact that when you go and buy it in the shop, they've done something really clever. What they've done is they've written on one of them organic and on another one free range.
That's the only difference, is what's written on the...
Pretty much, that's the only difference. I mean, yes, organic, they're not given antibiotics. They're not. There's less on a farm, but it's still thousands. And for lack of a better term, they are taken care of a little bit better. But it's not out of sympathy for their condition, it's out of monetary gains. So the farmer, if he gets an organic label, he's going to earn a lot more per bird. So it's worth the extra going up and down the sheds a few more times with a bit more sawdust to bed them up a bit more. It's worth having less birds in the shed, and it's worth picking up the dead. Free range, like I said before, as far as I'm aware, it means that they've had access to the outside. It doesn't mean they've actually been outside. Free range and organic are actually separated. They don't have to be both. They can be free range and basically standard fed, so they can have feed that has antibiotics in it and be free range, or they can be organic and free range, which again would just up the price. But again, I think these things are put on as labels more than anything else to earn a bit more money out of the sort of wealthier patrons, and to give people a false sense that they're doing something beneficial. They're still in terrible conditions. They're still being thrown into crates by people, and they're still then being hooked onto a line and having their throat slashed open.
This fantasy of these chickens running around the countryside healthy and happy, it really is just that, isn't it? I mean, you've got to think about the sheer volume of chickens that would have to be running around for that even to be possible. I mean, we'd just be seeing them everywhere, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
I mean, somebody said to me recently, think about it, if you order a bucket of 24 chicken wings, well, they've only got 2 per bird. That's 12 birds. It's such a reckless disregard for life. So, you know, just for somebody to have that KFC bucket, we need 12 chickens to be running around living a happy so-called life.
Yeah.
This is why they're all crammed into hangars, because it's just not possible or feasible.
No, it's not. I've never been to a farm that wasn't just a shed with birds in it. There's no such thing. Obviously people have backyard hens, and there'll be some farmer somewhere that has a few hens that lay eggs, and he has a farm shop, little chicken coop, and he has the chickens running around a little bit in a field. Maybe a small one, anyway. But actual chicken that people buy on the shelves, it is all raised in these sheds. I did it for 5-6 years, and I never went to a farm that wasn't 99% the same as every other farm.
Is there anything you've seen in the footage that people have recorded that doesn't translate well to the viewer, or that you would comment on?
I mean, recently VFC have gone into farms and they've taken sort of famous vegans into these farms and shown them the state that they live in. There's a few things, like I said before, that it looks like it's just complete waste on the ground, and yes, to an extent that is the majority of what it is, but they do put wood chips down. But the only reason to put wood chips down is to negate the fact that if they didn't, these chickens would literally be swimming around in their own feces. It just absorbs the water, because obviously wood's quite absorbent. So it sort of shows the level of effort they're really going to care for these birds. If that is the best they can do, they can't be able to clean them out. I don't think it, especially on like the hidden footage, like you've seen them, haven't you, where you get like the hidden cameras and show the reality of the situations. You don't see a lot of what goes on before the sheds are open, necessarily. We personally to go up and down sort of the area that we're working in and just try and find any that were dead. So there's a lot more dead in there than you realise, and a lot of farms, I don't know if it's every farm, but I'm pretty sure most farms will record on a chart the number that are in there at the beginning and the number that are there on clearing day. And it always goes down, it's a fair amount. I mean, obviously the numbers themselves are disgusting, but it is a disgusting amount of birds that are willingly accepted, as you will lose so many birds due to these conditions. I think it can be up to like 20%, I think. I mean, I know this isn't exactly the point But to all those people who think, oh, I'm only killing one animal, well, you're not, because to get to that point where that animal's on your plate, the amount that have already died in the process for being confined in these sheds because the conditions are so poor, just so that you can have that one bed and the farmer can make as much profit as possible, the amount that have died in the process, all of them beds are on your hands as well. So that doesn't translate well. And I think the main thing is, regardless of how much footage you get, it's the smell, it's the air. It's a smell I'll never forget, ever. The air's thick and warm. It has this smell to it that's just vile. It's absolutely vile. And I mean, if they bed up a lot, it negates it a bit, but it doesn't get rid of it. In fact, it probably makes it more dusty. But yeah, you can always tell how little they give a shit by how it smells.
Okay.
It's because the worse it smells, the less they've looked in on them, the less they've taken any form of care of them. And it's also guaranteed that there's a lot of dead lying around.
So do you think that people still working in that industry are bad people?
I think they're doing a bad job. I don't necessarily think they're bad people. It's wrong, right? The way that their birds are treated is wrong. But it doesn't automatically make them bad people. It means that the job is probably wrong. It shouldn't exist in the first place. They've not seen what I've seen. They've not realised yet that it's unnecessary. And regardless of if I say it's unnecessary, they still don't get it. I mean, some people have listened to me and gone, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But the people I work with, I mean, for the most part, I mean, some of them were a bit annoying, but they're not bad people. I don't think they're bad people. But saying that, I know for a fact that certain people that work in that industry are bad people. A few years before I started, there was a team that caught for Bernard Matthews. They were caught by an activist. I think they were hiding in the bushes outside. Two men were essentially playing baseball with a turkey and a pipe. Yeah, broke the turkey's spine, from what I understand. Like, I think there are psychopaths that work in it. I don't think everyone that works in that situation is a psychopath. I don't think it's the job that dictates whether you're a good or a bad person. I think you're a good or bad person regardless of what you do. But if you know the truth, you're not going to be in that situation. You're never going to put yourself in that situation. You'd rather just not do it, and you'll find something else. And I think if everyone could understand, like everyone that I've ever worked with, who could understand where I'm coming from and really understand what I understand, that they'd all say, yeah, you know what, nah, not doing it. I think the vast majority of people are good people. They just do some not good things without realising what they're doing. If you've got nothing, if there's no one else to work, you're there to support your family. The people that work in that situation, they've not got qualifications, they've not got any or many options, but they've got wives and kids, so they've not got another choice. They've got to go to work, they've got to earn enough to pay the bills, clothe the kids, feed the kids. There's nothing else to do. You're going to do it.
What would you say to people who still eat chicken and turkey?
I'd say, look at the footage. Look at what really goes on behind those closed doors, because there's a lot of difference to what you might think happens and what really happens. Because you got to think, when it's on the shelf in Tesco's, it's nicely packaged. It's about as far from a living chicken as it can be in terms of what it looks like. It doesn't look like a chicken at all. It just looks like a blob. So look at the footage. Don't believe everything that you hear. On top of that, I'd say as well, it's not exactly the same, but when you're talking to a vegan or someone that's trying to convince you, don't say the old adage of, oh, I only eat a little bit of chicken every now and again. But you're still putting thousands of chickens through hell. You're still making people work in those conditions. You're still supporting an industry which, if you're only eating a little bit of chicken, you must know that the meat industry is abhorrent. So you're still putting money into that system. How many thousands have to die until you realise that you don't need to eat it? It's for 5 minutes. 5 minutes of taste pleasure, 6 weeks of living hell, and then your throat slashed open.
Tell me about some of the worst things you saw during your time in the industry.
I don't even know where to start. It's odd because I've said things to people that, which I've seen, and they've acted so shocked about it, but I've been like, I've been sort of taken aback, and then realised, actually, no, you know what, for someone that's not seen the reality situation, maybe that is a bit shocking. I suppose the casual way in which undesirable birds are treated, like the way people can just snap their necks, and you can do it to thousands. Maybe not in one go, but over time, thousands. I saw a farmer once just casually, there was a turkey and I think its wing was broken, and he was like, oh lads, don't send that one, pass it here. So it wasn't me, I was working on a different module. It got passed over, and he just casually just took it, hung it on a fence, got out a penknife and slashed its throat. That sticks out in my mind as something that happened, and it took me aback. It really did, even though I'd seen like the reality situation quite a long time. The casual way in which it was done maybe took me aback, and the fact that it was just stuck there, like just blood bleeding out his throat, while we were just still creating them all up. And it was right there for me to see every time I looked up. There was one farm, I think it was the first time I'd ever actually seen female turkeys, and we went in. It's not what I saw, it's what I smelled. It was the worst smelling farm I've ever been to. I was literally gagging. I was physically nearly sick several times. I mean, the smell's bad anyway, but that was vile. The lack of standard on that farm, I think, is what I'm trying to get at. It was,
yeah,
and no one will know afterwards. When they're on the shelf or in the freezer, no one's going to know. No one's going to know what that bird lived in. So that was kind of shocking in itself. There was one time I picked up a bird, and I'll never forget this. It was on one of the first farms I went to. Because what you do is you grab one wing over, and then you grab its opposite leg, and you have it with its head to the ground. And it wasn't me who did it. It was clearly just a lame bird. I grabbed its wing, it was fine, and then its leg. But as I picked up its leg, it just felt like it was in water, and the joint had just come apart, and it must have been that way for a very, very long time. And because you sort of get into a rhythm, it's not, you're not thinking about them individually. You're not even really thinking about them as living. As horrible as that sounds, it's just you just get in the rhythm. 1 in, 2 in, 3 in, 4 in, and that just broke me out of that at that moment. It really did, and it was like, just Jesus, like that. It just brought me back to reality, and I just looked at it, and it was just sodden, like brown water all over its body, face, like, and you don't notice the emotions that they have most of the time, but at certain points I do remember seeing sort of emotion in their faces. This one it looked defeated. You know what I mean? It was really, really bad. But I didn't know what to do. I think I just got scared, so I just put it on and carried on. But yeah, that stuck with me. That was probably one of the worst for me memories that I have of it. I mean, I've seen birds get run over. I've seen, again, it's not nice, but to neck some birds, when they're older, you put 2 fingers under the throat like that, and grab its body, and legs, and you just pull, and that is considered the quickest way of doing it.
So this is humane killing.
This is culling essentially. But if there's sort of a discrepancy about when you meant to start that, what age you meant to start that, and when you meant, and this is even worse in my opinion, when they're really young, you meant to just grab the head, shake them around. They picked him up and they thought it was old enough for this to happen, so they did it that way, but it was still too young, and its head just came off and its spine came out after it.
Oh my God.
At the end of its spine. It was gross. I think all these things, again, I know this isn't the question, I think all these things really did stick with me, and it led me to a place where when I watched that video, it all clicked, yeah. And there was no way for me to deny it. All the footage that he showed in that.
No,
I couldn't deny any of it
yeah.
because I knew how vile it really was in that situation. So why should it be any different with cows and pigs? Yeah, like I said, I've seen them run over. I've seen sheds where the floor was just covered in decaying, rotting corpses. Like, it was disgusting. They clearly just never bothered picking up any dead. Not that dead being moved to a dead bin is any better. They shouldn't have been there in the first place. But again, it goes down to like the just sheer lack of care whatsoever, or like even giving any attention to these birds. Like, they just didn't care. I mean, it's obviously just a money game anyway. But like, how low the people running that farm must really think of these animals. I could probably go on, but
I'm not sure if you could even answer this, but if they're in these sheds with corpses that are decaying next to them and everything, then what kind of like process is there to like kind of sterilize the meat before it gets onto somebody's plate?
There isn't. That's why there's always those adverts. Oh, there was one advert, wasn't there? It was like this woman, she went round and she picked up a cloth and she was wiping on the side, but then it changed to a piece of chicken and she was wiping the surface with chicken and it showed like E. coli going everywhere.
Yeah.
There isn't. Like, that's why chicken is, like, you're always told to make sure you cook it really well. I mean, any meat you're told to cook it well, but yeah, with chicken you never want to eat it raw. You never want to go near it raw, and you want to always make sure.
It's truly dirty.
Yeah, it's filthy. Yeah, it doesn't matter how much they do. Because what do? They stun it, slice its throat, then they'll put it in a boiling bath to loosen the feathers, and they'll rip the feathers off, and then, but the factories are going to be as bacteria ridden as the farms. There's no way that the product that's on your plate was clean at any point, and the only reason you're not dying from it is the fact that it's been cooked at 200 degrees, and that's going to kill anything on it. Yeah, they're not. There's no safety measures that will come close to stopping disease from spreading.